Okay, let's dive in. We've got this, well, significant stack of documents in front of us.
Yeah.
Complaints, audits, court filings, internal stuff too, all pointing towards potential issues within a major public body, one that handles huge infrastructure projects. You know, the kind of projects a country really relies on for growth.
Absolutely. And these projects, they need solid foundations, literally with the concrete, but also, figuratively in how they're managed.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack these sources, see what they're really telling us.
Yeah, try to piece together the picture they paint about alleged irregularities. Execution, money, internal processes, it seems to cover a lot.
It really does. Quality audits, finances, how they buy things, even personnel issues. Across multiple projects, too.
So this isn't just about, one dodgy building or a single contract gone wrong.
Exactly. It's a look at the bigger picture, the challenges of managing these massive public works, and, well, the oversight that's supposed to be there, or maybe isn't always working as intended, according to these papers.
Where should we start?
Let's start with quality, because, if the buildings themselves aren't right, that's fundamental. The sources really seem to hit hard on this.
They do. One of the most alarming cases that pops up repeatedly is the NBCC Greenview project in Gurugram.
Right, I saw that. Complaints from the people living there.
Yeah, complaints from LATs about poor quality, seeing cracks, and that seems to have triggered, further investigation.
Which then involved technical experts looking into it more deeply.
Precisely. The documents mention an internal technical audit and also a CTE inspection, that's the Chief Technical Examiner's team. Both apparently flagged structural cracks and just generally poor quality work.
But then things escalated, didn't they? With IIT Delhi getting involved.
Yes, and that's where it gets quite serious. There's a follow-up report mentioned from IIT Delhi dated October 2021.
And what did IIT Delhi find?
Well, they detailed observed structural deterioration, and crucially, they expressed serious doubts about whether repairs were even feasible.
Not feasible. Why?
Because the damage was potentially so widespread, they suggested almost all the structural elements might need fixing. It wasn't just patching a few cracks.
Wow. Okay. So what was their ultimate recommendation then?
Evacuation.
Evacuation.
Yeah. They recommended residents vacate the building within 2 months. That finding really brings the human impact of these alleged quality issues into sharp focus, doesn't it?
Definitely. Evacuate your home within 2 months because the structure might be unsafe.
Yeah.
That's huge. But Greenview wasn't an isolated case mentioned in these documents, was it?
No, unfortunately not. The technical audit for AIMS, Diogur, that's in Jharkhand, also listed a whole bunch of problems.
Like what specifically?
Things like honeycombing in the concrete, basically gaps or voids, exposed steel reinforcement bars, improper column starters, that's the base where a column starts, missing shear keys, which help bond concrete layers together, uneven staircase landings, walls not being plumb, meaning not straight up and down.
Pretty fundamental construction errors.
Exactly. Basic stuff you'd expect to be right. And then there's the SVNIT Surat case.
Right, the Engineering Institute in Surat. The issues there sound like they appeared really quickly.
Yeah, that's what's striking. The complaints and reports detail things like concrete spalling where chunks break off, cracks in beams, columns, tiles falling off walls, floors heaving up, false ceilings collapsing, seepage, leaks, plaster problems.
Goodness. How long after construction did this happen?
That's the kicker, within just 3 to 4 years of the buildings being used. There's mention of a letter from the director there saying these defects made the buildings unpleasant, unsafe, and even unhygienic.
3 to 4 years is incredibly fast for that level of deterioration. It really makes you question the initial materials or workmanship, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the SVNIT documents actually dig into the technical why. They ran tests.
Okay, what did the tests show?
One key thing was chloride content in the concrete. Now think of chloride like road salt. It's really corrosive to the steel reinforcing bars inside the concrete.
Right, the rebar that gives concrete its strength.
Exactly, and they found high levels. One report cited figures from 4.8 up to over 37 km. Another found 6 to 9 km. The limit is just 0.6 km.
Wow, way over the limit then.
Massively over. And the reports identify this as a major cause of the rebar corroding, probably coming from contaminated water used for mixing the concrete or curing it.
So bad water essentially poisoning the concrete from the inside, causing the steel to rust away.
That seems to be the conclusion. They also measured concrete resistivity.
Okay, what does that tell you?
It's basically a measure of how easily corrosive elements can move through the concrete. Lower resistivity means it's easier for corrosion to happen, and happen faster.
And the readings were low.
Yes, the tests found low resistivity at many spots, indicating a high to very high risk of steel corrosion. Even if different reports had slightly different numbers, they agreed the resistivity was generally low.
So high chloride and low resistivity, a bad combination. Did they check if corrosion was actually happening?
They did, using something called the half-cell potential test. It kind of maps out areas where corrosion is likely active. The findings suggested active corrosion was already underway in about 60% of the locations they tested.
And what about general concrete quality tests, like the UPV or rebound hammer?
They did those too, but the reports apparently noted that the results were kind of doubtful, either because the concrete quality was poor to start with, or because the corrosion damage had already messed things up.
So it's a pretty consistent picture of compromised materials leading to rapid decay. Were they trying to fix things at SVNIT?
The documents mention, that a third-party inspection was recommended, the contractor engaged consultants, and specific repair work was happening, waterproofing, fixing floors, tiles, cracks, ceilings, that sort of thing.
So was it all fixed?
Well, the reports indicated some issues, like the heaved tiles and some cracks, were still being worked on when the documents were compiled. It wasn't fully resolved at that point.
So when we talk about technical stuff like chloride content or resistivity, why does it matter to you, the listener?
Because it's the science behind why a building might fail. It directly impacts the safety and the lifespan of structures built with public money.
Right. And that IIT Delhi recommendation to evacuate Greenview, that's the real-world consequence, isn't it? It shows just how serious these technical failures can be.
Exactly. It's not just numbers on a page. It translates directly to safety risks and potentially huge costs down the line.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Let's follow the money trail. This is another big theme in these documents.
Yes, and a lot of the focus here seems to be on the ITPO project, a big exhibition and convention center in Delhi.
What kind of financial issues are alleged there?
Well, the documents point to some really significant figures. There are allegations reportedly flagged in both a CBC report and internal notes by the chief vigilance officer.
The internal watchdog.
Right. Allegations of around 400 crores in excess payments made to the main contractor, Shapurji Palanji. The claim is this went against the tender conditions.
400 crores. That's a staggering figure. What else?
There's also mention of 2 special advances given to the same contractor. Each one was for 100 crores.
So another 200 crores in advances. Was there an issue with these?
The sources allege these were approved by the board even though the contractor supposedly wasn't performing. And the argument made in the documents is that giving these advances, especially without performance, essentially vitiated the whole tender process, undermined the competition.
So alleged overpayments and large advances despite non-performance. Does anyone internally push back on paying contractor claims?
Yes, there seems to have been internal debate. The documents detail controversy around approving one specific claim called VO141. Apparently, it was initially rejected, deemed not tenable.
Okay.
But then a revised claim was put in. And the sources cite an internal email suggesting that senior managers, a CGM and a GM from engineering were directing staff to basically find a way to pay the contractor, despite that initial rejection.
Even though it had been flagged as not valid.
That's the allegation. And the document notes someone internally raised concerns about, potential objections from the CAG, the government auditors, and also the risk that the client might not even reimburse NBCC for these disputed amounts.
That suggests potential pressure to pay, overriding standard checks. Did the external auditors, like CAG, pick up on financial issues in other projects?
Yes. The documents mention CAG audit findings for work at IIT Mandi Phase I North. The audit apparently observed big swings in costs, negative variations, and also huge variations in the quantities of materials listed in the BOQ, the Bill of Quantities.
So the amounts of work or materials used were way off the initial estimates.
Yeah, which raised questions in the audit about how these deviations and extra items were being justified and approved.
Any other unusual money movements mentioned?
There's a note about a project in Bihar, the PMGSY Road project. It says funds specifically meant for that project, sitting in a Bihar bank account, were transferred to the NBCC head office in Delhi in March 2019.
Why was that done?
The document says it was decided in a review meeting to centralize Treasury functions. But, moving funds dedicated to a specific state project to the central HQ is noted as a point of interest in the source.
So when you pull all these threads together, The alleged 400 crore excess payment, the advances, the internal arguments over claims, the CAG flagging variations, the fund transfer. It's not just accounting details, is it?
Not at all. It's about how public money, your money, is being handled on these huge projects. It raises questions about whether the checks and balances, the systems designed to ensure payments are proper and justified, are actually working.
Or if, as these documents allege, they were sometimes bypassed or overridden.
Exactly. It speaks to the robustness of financial controls and decision-making at various levels.
Right. Which brings us nicely to the third big area these sources cover: the processes and the people. How things are supposed to work versus how they allegedly did work.
Yeah, this covers everything from how consultants and contractors get picked to appointments and just general oversight breakdowns.
Let's start with consultant appointments. CAG seemed to have flagged issues there.
They did. The documents cite CAG audit findings for several projects, for example, at Netaji Nagar.
What was the issue there?
The tender required bidders to prove their experience with things like TDS certificates and, importantly, submission drawings showing the scale of their past work. The audit apparently found cases where experience was accepted even without the required drawings. Or, in other cases, the architect named on the drawings wasn't actually the firm bidding for the job.
So the verification of crucial experience criteria was allegedly weak.
That seems to be the implication. And it gets, well, potentially more serious at the Sarojini Nagar project, according to the CAG findings cited.
What happened there?
The audit observed that the entire first stage of the technical evaluation, which was worth 60% of the marks, likely the more objective part, was just deleted.
Deleted.
Yeah. And those marks were shifted into the second stage, which was only worth 40%. This effectively made the whole selection process 100% subjective.
100% subjective. That sounds highly unusual for a public tender.
Extremely. The source notes this was done supposedly in response to a pre-bid query that wasn't even directly about deleting the marking stage, and it violated approved procedures. Plus, they also apparently capped the maximum project area considered for qualification at half the total project size.
Removing objective scoring seems like a massive red flag. Any other issues with consultant selection?
For the ITPO consultant selection, the audit noted changing criteria during the process, and the source mentions a concern that cartel formation couldn't be ruled out.
Why cartel formation?
Partly because of how bidders were apparently notified about presentations. A single email reportedly went out listing all qualified bidders and their time slots together.
Interesting. The issue of proving experience seems key here.
It does. And the sources even include a reference to a Delhi High Court order stating that using false certificates for experience disqualifies bidders from CPWD tenders, just providing that legal context for why accurate documentation matters so much.
Okay, so issues with selecting consultants. What about internal appointments? The documents mention complaints there, too.
Yes, there's a specific complaint referenced concerning the promotion and appointment of one individual, Shri KPM Swami.
What does the complaint allege?
It alleges he was promoted, eventually becoming director, commercial, and later CMD, despite supposedly being listed in adverse vigilance profiles. The claim is that negative reports were suppressed to allow this.
Okay.
The sources cite specific complaint numbers and also link it to complaints regarding SVNIT. Now, we have to be clear, we are reporting this neutrally, just as it's presented in the documents provided.
Understood. Do the documents mention general rules about promotions when someone has issues pending?
Yes, they reference government rules which allow for promotion sometimes on an ad hoc basis while a disciplinary or court case is ongoing. If the person is later cleared, they might get notional promotion from the original date. So there are procedures, but the allegation here is about suppression of information.
And this theme of alleged breakdowns in checks and controls extends beyond just tendering and appointments.
It seems so. Audit observations apparently highlighted a lack of internal checks in how legal work was assigned and how lawyers were evaluated.
Legal services. How so?
A specific point relates to a general power of attorney. It allegedly went against internal procedures, the SOOP, standing orders on operational procedure. Powers given to the director commercial were apparently further delegated down to a deputy GM in law.
Including the power to hire lawyers and set their fees.
Yes, according to the source. And the audit apparently found that for some lawyers being used, Records like appointment letters or even case details were missing. Some lawyers weren't even on the official approved list, the impaneled list.
So a lack of proper process and record keeping for legal appointments and payments.
That's what the audit seems to suggest. And then there are even more serious allegations about information being actively hidden or misrepresented.
Says yes.
The documents allege that false information was given to constitutional authorities, the CVC, CAG, MPs, even parliamentary committees. The claim is this was done to cover up irregularities.
Misleading oversight bodies.
That's the allegation, and it extends to courts as well. Alleged misrepresentation before the Delhi High Court about excess commercial space in the East Kidwai Nagar project, and before the Supreme Court regarding the Amrapali projects, specifically about how far along they were and how funds were used. Again, these are very significant claims laid out in the source material.
And have any of these alleged issues led to formal investigations?
The sources indicate yes. They include details of a CBI FIR related specifically to the Greenview project quality issues.
Okay.
It reportedly names numerous individuals from NBCC itself, contractors, consultants alleging offenses like criminal conspiracy, cheating, and corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act.
So criminal charges being investigated.
It appears so. And the sources also mention related actions like Enforcement Directorate or ED raids. One raid reportedly led to significant recoveries, cash, jewelry, property documents from the home of a former NBCC general manager linked to a related case. As always, just presenting the information from the documents.
So when you look at this whole section, the alleged issues in tenders, appointments, internal controls, the very serious claims about misleading authorities in courts, and now potential criminal investigations.
It really highlights how crucial these processes are. The tender rules, the vigilance checks, the internal procedures. They're all meant to guarantee fairness, competence, accountability.
And these documents raise serious questions about what allegedly happens when those systems face challenges or are bypassed or, as claimed, deliberately undermined.
It shows how interconnected everything is, procedural integrity, financial honesty, and ultimately the quality and safety of what gets built.
Okay, so let's try to wrap up this deep dive based on the sources you've given us. We've seen a pretty wide spectrum of alleged issues, haven't we?
We really have. From, fundamental quality concerns, cracking concrete, potential safety issues leading to an evacuation call at Greenview, similar problems flagged at SVNIT and Ames Diogar.
Right, through to major alleged financial irregularities, that huge 400 crore figure for excess payments at ITPO, unauthorized advances, questions raised by CAG audits about variation.
And then into the process side, alleged manipulations in consultant selection, questions around key appointments, breakdowns in internal controls for things like legal services.
And finally, those very serious allegations of potentially misleading oversight bodies and even the courts, culminating in CBI and ED involvement mentioned in the documents.
Yeah, the picture painted by these sources taken together is definitely one of significant challenges across the board. Quality control, financial discipline, procedural transparency within this major public sector entity, managing large, complex projects.
Which really leaves us with a final thought, something for you, our listeners, to consider. When you think about the massive scale and importance of public construction, what do you think is the most critical thing needed to make sure these projects work?
Is it about having really tough internal rules and checks? Or is it more about strong, independent external oversight, like the auditors and vigilance bodies?
Or maybe it comes down more to individual accountability, making sure people are held responsible for their decisions and actions.
Or perhaps it's a combination of all three. But the key question is, how can these elements be strengthened to try and prevent the kinds of issues alleged in these documents from happening? It's a vital question when we're talking about building the nation's future with public funds.